I've tried to do this intro 3 times, and one, my battery was dead, my books fell, and I needed more space on my camera. So 3rd time is the charm. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another monthly reading wrap up. We are going to be doing July and August because I did not film a July reading wrap up. I took a little break from YouTube. I didn't film as often as I normally do, just cause. Not really super any particular reason why, but I did kind of chill on social media for a month or 2, and that was really nice. But I'm back, I'm ready to film more videos. Michael and I have moved, which is really exciting, and I can't wait to show you guys more. But we're just gonna be talking about books in today's video. I read a total of 11 books in July and August combined. I did get into a little bit of a reading slump. I feel like I would have read a bit more, but some of these books just really did not do it for me. Some of them did. So let's just get right into it, and you can probably see one that you really want to hear about right there. So we're going to be talking about some summer books too, because obviously we're talking about July and it is now September 3rd. So I'm in full fall mood, ready for fall, but we're going to be reminiscing on summer a little bit with some of these books. So I'm just going to talk about these together. This is the Summer I Turned Pretty series, which is this first one. And if you haven't seen the show, I think they did a pretty good job. I think I liked season 2 a bit better than season 1, even though there was some episodes in season 2 I really didn't care for. Anyway, I read these books when I was younger. I don't know, probably like a preteen, like before I was a teenager, which that's what preteen means. But I don't know, I would say between 11 and 13 I read these books, and I loved them so much, so much. I don't think I had ever read the 3rd one though. I think I had only read the 1st and 2nd one, so I was really excited to read the 3rd one and see how she Jenny Han wrapped it up, and it definitely took me for a whirlwind. But I love these books so much. They are so dear to my heart, and I think because I read them when I was so young. Let me see exactly what I rated them, because I would give this series like overall a 4 stars. I really like this series. Now you have to go into it knowing that this is YA, this is very young, okay? This is like coming of age. But again, I think because I kind of grew up with this series, I just love it so much. So don't go into this expecting like the best summer read you've ever had in your adult life. You can really relate to it. No, it's going to be when you're reading it, you're thinking about your young preteen years and how it was to have your first crush and your first kiss and things like that. So really go into it with that. But I really enjoyed these, enjoyed the summer vibe. Definitely some of my favorite summer books. Yeah, so I gave all these books a 4-star, and I would definitely say that overall this series was a good 4-star for me. Okay, so those were 3 books, but kind of in one because they're a series. I guess I should tell you a little bit what it's about, but I feel like everyone kind of knows what it's about. But basically you're following Belly, and she has this summer house with her mom and her mom's best friend and her sons, and so they kind of all grew up together because they see each other every summer. And of course there is kind of a love triangle between Belly and the 2 brothers that she's been seeing every summer, and this summer she's kind of grown up. That's why it's the Summer I Turned Pretty. She's kind of coming into age, and so the boys are kind of noticing her and just her going through that. It sounds a little bit naive, which it is, but that's also how you are when you're young. So it's just a really fun read. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so the next few books that I'm going to talk about, I actually did a video for, and I think it was reading fantasy for a week. So if you haven't watched that video, I go into quite a bit more detail on these books, and I think I did talk about my ratings, and we'll see if my ratings have kind of changed from that video. I can't even really remember what I said about the ratings. I mean, I think I can, but we'll see if they're different. I definitely think they probably are pretty close. But the first one I read in that series was The Ballad of Never After, which this is book number 2 in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. And some people literally die for this series. They love this series, and I think I gave the first one a 3.5 stars, and I think I would give this one probably a 3 stars. Honestly, I don't even really remember what happened in this dang book because I read this so long ago and it just didn't really stick with me. This is kind of like a fairy tale fantasy type of book, which I really thought I would really enjoy because I haven't read many of those. But I don't know, I guess it didn't seem high stakes, even though it's kind of high stakes, but you're not really feeling the high stakes that the characters are. I really like Jax, of course, which is the main male character in this book, but for some reason Evangeline, which is the female main character, she just kind of bothers me. Like, I like her okay, but some decisions she makes and the way she thinks sometimes just really bothers me. But I definitely will be reading the third, and I think it's the final book. It comes out, I think, later this year, and I definitely will be reading it. Like, I like the series enough to know what happens, but it didn't stick with me. I think I would give this one a 3 or a 3.5, but I want to say I kind of liked the first book better, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I can't say too much what this is about because, again, it's book 2. But if you are into like fairy tale kind of fantasy, kind of cozy fantasy, I definitely would suggest this. And some people love this series so much they give it 5 stars. So if you're maybe slightly interested, I would definitely recommend it because it is YA as well. So it's pretty easy to read and there's not too much spice. I didn't say about spice, but I want to talk about spice about each of these books because I just feel like I need to say that. So with The Summer I Turned Pretty, and maybe I'll add like spice indicators down here. I've seen a few booktubers do that and I really appreciate that. But The Summer I Turned Pretty, obviously it's YA. I would say there's very, very little spice. It's YA. So I feel like a lot of ages can read it. So I wouldn't even really be concerned about with that. With The Ballad of Never After, it is YA again. I can't really remember there being too much spice, and maybe just like fade to black spice, fade to black, is that right? Yeah, closed door, fade to black spice. Yeah, so I would say they're pretty similar, the Summer Turned Pretty series and The Ballad of Never After, as far as I can remember. Now, this next book that I read, which again is another fantasy, I gave 5 freaking stars to Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And guys, this is only the second 5-star that I have given in all of 2023, and we are in September right now. And I read this in July, so more than half the year, and I have already only given 2 stars, 2 5-star ratings. And this is a fantasy, and it is just so good. Again, I feel like this isn't super high fantasy. I won't say, I do think it's high stakes kind of, but I wouldn't say it's super high fantasy like when reading ACOTAR or even Fourth Wing. I feel like it's a little bit more higher fantasy, I guess. But I definitely suggest this book if you have not read much fantasy but you want to maybe dabble into it. This is such a good book because I feel like it really is set in our world, or that's how you could really picture it, but a little bit set back in time. I would say like kind of World War II vibes. So it was very interesting to read. It almost read as historical fiction at times. Now, the element that is fantasy is there is this war going on between like these gods, which I was very skeptical about that concept when I was going into this book, but I loved this book so much. I thought Rebecca Ross did it really well, and I think this is going to be a duology, and the second book comes out in December, and I literally cannot wait because it ends on a cliffhanger, of course. Her writing is just so gorgeous in this book, and the romance in this book, there is a plot of romance, and I don't even know if I would call it like subplot. Like this, it's pretty heavily romance involved, and it is so beautiful and really emotional, and you definitely get invested, at least in my opinion, with the characters' love story. But basically this is about Roman and what is her name? Really, I cannot remember her name. Iris. I should know that because it's one of my favorite books, but it is between Iris and Roman, and they're kind of like work rivals, and so they don't really get along very well, but somehow they end up communicating, not knowing it's each other, but one of them kind of knows it's the other person. If you've ever seen the movie You Got Mail, I talked about this in my vlog, but it kind of reminded me of that, where 2 people are exchanging emails and they kind of know, or one of them knows who the other person is, but the other one doesn't, and so they kind of get invested in that way, but they don't really know who each other is. So it's just really interesting, and that's kind of what this book is about. I love this book so much. I definitely suggest this book. Of course, I gave it 5 stars. I feel like I didn't do a really good job explaining about what this book is, but you just need to read it. It's an easy read too. I annotated this book, and the writing is just so freaking gorgeous. I'm gonna talk about this book now. I can't remember at one point I read it. I know it was in July, but I wouldn't say I DNF'd this book, but I guess I did. Like, for now, I DNF'd it. I won't say that I will never pick it up again. I got to page 126, so I got like pretty far within the book, and this is The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walter. And I have heard such great things. I think last summer this book was kind of going around, and so of course during July I really wanted to pick this up and read it, but I just could not get into it, and I don't know why I couldn't get into it, but I just couldn't. I wasn't really interested in finishing it. I picked it up multiple times in between different books trying to get to it, and I just couldn't. So I got pretty far, but I DNF this, and there's another DNF that you will see for August as well. So someone tell me that they felt the way I did reading this. I don't know if it was just the time of the month that I was reading it, or like I was reading it after certain books and I just couldn't get into it. I don't know. So the next book that we have is Fourth Wing, and again, I have talked about this in my Reading Fantasy for a Week video, so I won't go on too much about it because everyone has heard so much about this book. But I was pretty disappointed because I think of the hype that this book got. I think if it didn't have as much hype as it did, I probably still would have rated it the same, but I wouldn't have been so disappointed. I was expecting a 5-star because everyone was literally saying that this is their new favorite book. It got them out of a book slump. It felt like crack. They had to turn the pages. No. This book literally put me into a book slump. I went into a book slump and I couldn't get out for a couple weeks. This book took me forever to read as well, and I was even filming a video for it, so I try to read a little bit faster when I'm like vlogging a certain book. And it took me like 7 days to finish this book. Now, it is a little bit hefty. It's like 500 pages. And her writing is a little bit strange to me, but yeah, I just didn't care for this book. I really like the concept. It's about this like dragon war college, and so I really liked the concept, but I really thought that it could have been better implemented, better written about. I don't know. I felt like there was holes within the plot a little bit, and the pacing was super weird, and also it was pretty dang spicy. So I will just say that, and it wasn't until the like close to the end that it got spicy, and I'm just like, as soon as it got to that, their romance, I just wasn't as interested in, because, you know, we love that tension, we love a little bit of a mystery, and then it just became like boom in your face, this, and kind of constant. So you guys know me, I'm not a huge fan of spice. I don't mind it a little bit, but it ruins the romance for me sometimes. I gave this a 3 stars. Yes, 3 stars. I was gonna say maybe 3.5, but I think I would give this 3 stars. I don't think I would give this 3.5 stars. I don't care to ever read this again, and like I said, people have been saying as soon as they finish reading it, they want to read it again. No, I will not be reading that again. The names of these people, some of the people, and dragons, it's like, okay, I know you're trying to like have intelligent writing. I know you're trying to be different and quirky, okay? But if your dragon's name is 20 characters long and I have no idea how to pronounce it, and I just don't care every time, I just read right past it, that's not engaging with your readers. And maybe there was some meaning behind these names, I get that, but explain that, or say how to pronounce it or something, so that I can continue with you, invested into the book and just completely immersed. No, I don't know. I was really disappointed about that book, okay? And I know some people love it, but I just thought there was so many other great books like Divine Rivals. Oh my gosh, that is so much a better written book in my opinion. And I'm not trying to say anything about Rebecca Yarros, but I think for the hype the book got, I was just expecting so much more. The next book that I read, I had to read a thriller after all that fantasy, but I read The Quiet Tenet, and this is by Clement, I'm not even gonna try to say that name. You guys see the name. But I believe she is French, and this is her first book, I think. I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars. This is about a serial killer, and mostly it is from the perspective of the woman that he has locked up in this shed. So I know that sounds really dark and really twisty, so of course it is, but the way it is written is actually really beautiful, and the author actually changes like from second and third person, I think, and maybe even some first person, I can't remember. But when it is from the viewpoint of the woman in the shed, like the chapter will be called The Woman in the Shed, and it will be from her viewpoint, her talking kind of, but you're in her head, but it's in second person. And I just thought that that was so interesting. I think because of the psyche of someone who is in that situation, the way that she wrote this in the perspective of using second person, I just thought it was so interesting. And then when it goes to like someone else's perspective, it's in normal like third person, because a lot of people write in third person. I don't even know if this is ever in first person, but she just did that really well, and it was so interestingly written. A very good story. I wouldn't give it 5 stars because it wasn't one that like got me, you know, like a huge twist, not that I can remember. But it was super good, and for it being what it is, about a serial killer having someone locked up, I feel like she wrote it well. It wasn't ever too gruesomely describing like the details that we don't need, like we get what's going on. So she explains it in a way that is not overly like, we know what's going on. You don't need to describe every disgusting detail, and she did that in a really good way. So if that sounds interesting to you, I think this is a very good book. It's not too dark and too twisty, like I said, because she doesn't go into too much detail, and it's not glorifying it. So I think I was kind of disappointed with the ending. I mean, it ended kind of how you expected to, I think, but I think that's what kind of disappointed me. But 4 stars, I really like that book, and I haven't really heard anyone talking about that book, so a really good read. The next book that I read is Hello Stranger by Catherine Center, and I have read The Bodyguard by her, and I haven't read any others, but I really want to. My mom loves her, and I know they have a Netflix movie that just came out of, I think Happiness for Beginners. So she has a bunch of books, and I think she's based in Texas, and a lot of her books are based in Texas, like this one, and so I just really appreciate that because I'm from Texas. But this one was really, really cute. I gave this one 4 stars as well. You can tell I kind of started to come out of my book slump after this. But yeah, this one was really cute. It's about our main character. She actually gets into an accident and she gets face blindness. And she is also a portrait artist. So obviously this becomes a big issue, and she is in a competition trying to win. And she all of a sudden gets this face blindness. So it's kind of her experiencing that and working through that. There is some romance, but I wouldn't say that's like the main point of this book. And it was just really interesting. There was a couple little twists and turns that definitely got me. My mom saw some of them coming, but I was so into the book, I was just oblivious to them. It was a fun book. Catherine Center always writes like fun, honestly funny books. So if you want kind of a more lighthearted read, but also has some deeper elements to it and just a really, really fun book, I definitely suggest this one. And there is no spice, I don't think, or it's like fade to black. Catherine Center does a really good job of that. So I feel like anyone who maybe is a little bit uncomfortable with spice or just doesn't want to read that at the moment, this is definitely a good book and definitely a good author if you want to look her up. I really liked The Bodyguard too, but I think I like Hello Stranger better. I think I gave Bodyguard 3 stars and this one was 4. The next book is The Appeal, and if you know, I've had this on my physical TBR for a long time, so I'm very excited that I finally got to this one. And I gave 3 stars to The Appeal. I was a little bit disappointed because even though I was excited to read this, it just took me a while to pick it up. But when I finally picked it up, I was excited because I knew I would probably really, really enjoy this. And it was good, but it wasn't as good as I was anticipating. So basically this whole book is written in like text and emails, and I have read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which if you've read that book, you know that there is some mixed media within there, like there is transcripts and things like that. And so it's not just straight up dialogue and narrative, there is that mixed media element. I really like that in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but this whole book was that. Like there was no regular narrative. And so I think if there was some regular narrative involved in the mixed media, I would have liked this better, because at the points where it was like the characters who were present at the time, like talking about this, they were texting, and I couldn't wait to get to their part. So we were like back up to present. I don't know, I just feel like I wish there was a little bit more narrative and a little bit more explanation. It drug on a little bit for me. This was a long book for, you know, a murder mystery book, but it was still a really interesting concept. Basically, there is this theater group and there is some sketchy stuff going on, and so you're just reading the emails between all of them about this play that they're doing, and then there is a murder that is involved with one of the characters. And let me just tell you, the murder didn't happen until like page 200 or 300, okay? It took a while to get to that. I thought that would be, you know, soon in the beginning, but no, it took so long, and I didn't really care for the ending as well. There was like way too many characters, way too many things going on. It was still fun, like I don't regret it, and if that sounds interesting to you, again, I would suggest this book, but definitely was not life-altering. I wouldn't call that a thriller book at all. I would call that more of like a mystery. It was just okay. It wasn't anything like great, so 3 stars. Okay, I'm gonna talk about my other DNF because I think it was around this time, but sadly to say, I DNF'd tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Again, this is another one that people so over hyped up or just hyped up. My cousin, this was actually our book club pick, and I actually picked this book. I didn't really know what it was about other than 2 characters creating a video game, and that sounded interesting and kind of like their life going through that, but I just could not get into this book, and I actually got pretty far. I got to page, I think like 160 something, and so I got to right here. So I was like literally almost halfway, so I got pretty far within this book, but it was just slow to me. Also, there were some very weird elements to this book that I didn't really care for that they were explaining, and it just felt like so why are we talking about this? Why are we adding this character who's so horrible into it? And maybe he had more of a point in the end, but it just sounded like it was just talked about, like just talk about like some weird elements to it. So I don't know. I heard that this book though does go a little crazy at the end. Like a lot of stuff happens. It's a little more involved because to me it was kind of slow, at least what I had read. So I know it kind of goes a little bit more unhinged at the end, but also I wasn't really interested in some of the aspects of this book that they were talking about. So I don't really suggest this book. That's just my opinion. A lot of people love this book, but again, I didn't think that the writing was that great. You can tell that she is intelligent and she, you know, her writing is not bad, okay? But again, the pacing of things was just strange to me because it would spend chapters talking about like 1 or 2 days. Then it'd be like months later with these characters. And I'm just like, okay. And also some of the characters really, really annoyed me. So I don't know. I DNF'd that. I will not be picking up that book. I probably will be bringing this to Half Price Books to resell because I just didn't really care for that one. The next book that I read is one I haven't heard people talk about, and this is Ledge by Stacey McEwen, I think, or McEwen. Apparently she is like a book talker or a booktuber book person, and I have no idea who she is, but I read that like on the back inside of the book talking about the author, so that's kind of fun. But I know that this is new, and the second book is coming out this month, and I'm super excited. I gave this 4 stars. This is a fantasy, and it was really interesting to me, and I was trying to explain this to my cousin, and the best that I can is, you know, when you're reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, okay, the beginning part of the book where it's Feyre in the woods, she's in like the human realm and with the cabin with her sisters, her dad, and she's hunting in the woods in the snow, and it's like super cold. That's what this whole book kind of reminds me of, and I know some people didn't love that part of Avatar, but I actually really liked that part. This is about a girl named Dawson, and she basically lives on the edge of this like really high glacier, and that's why it's called Ledge. And there's like this chasm in between their side of the ledge where these humans are on who live like very, very poor. It kind of reminds me of Hunger Games in that aspect, and also in the aspect of, you know, in Hunger Games there's like a sacrifice where the person goes into Hunger Games and they're basically acting like a sacrifice. Well, there is that involved in this as well, not part of games, but there is these characters called Galatians, these beings, these creatures called Galatians, and they will fly over to the human side of the ledge and take one of them like every season, and then the humans don't really know what happens to them once they go on the other side of the chasm. And so really interesting, really fun book, and I'm definitely excited to read the second one. There is quite a bit of spice in this one. It's a little bit of a slow burn, and enemies to lovers, so if that sounds interesting to you, great. Again, a little bit too much spice for my liking, because again, it just kind of like makes me not as invested into the characters and into the plot, you know, because then it's all about that. But definitely really good. Gave 4 stars. I'm excited to read the second one, and it's kind of fun when you read a book that you haven't heard too much about because you get to kind of have your own opinions, you know. But a really, really good, easy read. I thought the writing was really well for it. I think it was her first book, so really fun read, really, really interesting concept. And yeah, if you want to read more fantasy, easy fantasy, definitely easy fantasy to get into, I suggest that one. Now the last book that I read, I forgot to say what was in July and what was in August, but I think I read, okay, so I read 7 books in July and 4 books in August. So the last book that I read in July was Quiet Tenet. The first book that I read in August was Hello Stranger. So we have been in August, obviously, and this is the last book that I read in August, and this is Only Love Can Hurt Like This by Paige Toon. This is my first book by her, and I gave this 3.5 stars. Now, I liked this book so much when I was starting it and getting into that. I was like, oh my gosh, this might be a 5-star read. It was emotional. I could really picture it. I just really, really liked it, and I liked the characters. Then we kind of got towards the main plot towards the end and kind of the reveal of some things, and I knew that this was going to be a book that was going to make me emotional because that's what a lot of people have said, and that's why I was really interested in it. But it was emotional, and I did, like, you know, get choked up while reading it, and so I appreciate that. But this was such a hard situation that this main character was in, that I just don't know how I feel about it. And I think maybe that's the point. Like, I couldn't choose. She had to choose between 2 different things, or like 2 different situations. I don't know what I would do in that situation, or I don't know how. I see both sides of it, but you pretty much lose on both sides. So it was very pulling at your heartstrings. But this is about a girl named Rin, and she lives in like England, and then she comes to America to go visit her dad like every so often, and she is staying with him, and her dad and her stepmom just bought like this farm, and so she goes and stays with them and kind of learns the farm life. And there is these neighbors, and there is a couple male characters that are her age, and she ends up falling for one of them, and it's kind of their battle with their love and some things that some of them are going through behind the scenes that you don't know, and that's kind of the reveal, and then them navigating that. And it was just really interesting, but again, really hard. Once they revealed that, I was just like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And I was kind of mad at first because I was like, oh, obviously I would do this, which was opposite of kind of what they were doing. But then as you kind of got into it and they were explaining it, I was like, wow, I do not know what I would do in a situation like that. So I really suggest this book, but I do feel like some people think one way or the other. I guess some people could see it both sides like me, but it was just really hard to kind of like swallow. So that's why I gave it 3.5. I think I would have gave it like 4, but I think some of it was kind of ruthless. Like, I don't know. I just don't know what I would do. That was like a really, not a hard book to read because it was a fun book to read, but it was just hard to swallow, a lot of that. Very pull at your heartstrings, and I hadn't had that in a while. So I enjoyed it at the time, but it just kind of like, I was like, wow. But her writing was really good, a very fast book. So if you need a fast book, that is definitely a good one. Okay, well, those are all the books. I feel like I've literally talked forever, but we got through 2 months worth of books, and I am planning on hopefully staying up to date with each month so that it can go a little bit quicker. But let me know your thoughts on any of these books, what you have rated them, what you think. If you think for the opposite of me, let's talk about it. I love chatting with you guys, and yeah, I hope to see you guys soon in my next monthly wrap-up video.